Welcome to the Indie KidLit podcast. Join Marti Dumas and Elena Page on their quest to help children's and middle grade authors find the right audience and sell more books. Hi, and welcome to the Indie KidLit podcast. I'm Marti Dumas.
And I'm and it's currently at 5 books. It combines modern-day fictional adventures with historical locations and figures like St. John's Church, Belle Isle, Maymont, Patrick Henry, Robert E. Lee, Louis Ginter, I hope I said that right, and many others. I am not from the US, so they mean nothing to me, but Stephen can tell me all about them. His other works include the middle grade comedy Brother Wars, the parenting memoir Splashing in the Deep End, and the adult contemporary fiction novel Harborwood, which is written under the name Stephen Sawyer. Over the past 2 years, Stephen has visited more than 50 elementary schools in Central Virginia. His first book, Summer of the Woods, is in development for a film. So there's some amazing things happening. Welcome to the show, Stephen.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be on.
So tell us a bit about your...
Fancy pants.
Yeah, I knew you'd say that. I don't think I told you about that, Marty. I thought I'd surprise you on it.
Slip that one in.
Well, I didn't want to give you too much away about him. I wanted you to be impressed on the day. So that's worked. So tell us a bit about your journey, Stephen, and how you've ended up writing KidLit and where you're at now versus where you started 2 years ago and how you've done it.
Sure. No, so it's been interesting and a lot of fun. I started back in 2009 as writing a blog about being a dad to 3 little boys. So that was kind of my starting. I always liked to write when I was younger, but I hadn't done it for quite a while. So that kind of got me back in the writing thing again. So was doing a couple blog posts a week and did that for a few years when my youngest was born back in 2009. And we do a lot of reading at bedtime with our older 2 boys when they were a little bit younger. So lots of different books like Narnia and adventures like Tom Sawyer and different things. So told a lot of stories, and then I started making up a story that I thought my 2 oldest boys would enjoy, because I think it's funny listening to a lot of children's writers. That's how a lot of folks have kind of gotten started, of doing it for their own kids. So that turned into a story that they liked, and I didn't really know it was going to start out being a book, but I kept on working at it, and then decided to go the indie route because a lot of things that I was looking into seemed like a lot of fun, and I like the entrepreneurial side of things myself. So went that route from the very beginning, and that turned into Summer of the Woods, which is my first book. And interestingly, some of their friends started reading it. The elementary school that they go to picked it up pretty quickly and used it as their school-wide reading program. So kind of right out of the gate, I felt really fortunate that turned into something where, a few hundred people were reading that within a few months. And I have been listening to a ton of podcasts. Has always been one of my big ways to educate myself about the indie writing and everything. So the Creative Pen and the Self-Publishing podcast and all those different ones for quite a few years. So heard a lot that kind of starting and doing a second book is one of the best ways to market your first book. So as soon as things started to kind of look positive, I started plugging away on the second one, and decided to make it into a series, which I called the Virginia Mysteries. So I kind of take adventures and mysteries and then mix them in with what I kind of a twist of history. And I learned, we moved to Virginia about 6 years ago now. So I grew up in New Jersey, but we moved down here to Virginia. And Virginia, as kind of the birthplace of the European settlement to the US, there's history everywhere you go. And, Virginians are kind of rabid about their history. So my kids were learning about it in school and learning a lot of things that, I didn't really know a lot of details about when I grew up. So this was fascinating to me. So this is a really cool fit to put together kind of these stories with some of this local history, which the cool thing is a lot of Virginia history is US history as well. So putting those together, and then have kind of been rolling out a book or so a year since then. So now there's 5 books in the series, and I'm working on the 6th one right now. So it's been very busy, kind of doing it on the side, but it's been really rewarding, and it's been fun to kind of see it take off. You know, there's little benchmarks along the way, but even in the last 8 or 10 months, things have kind of spiked a little bit more. So it's been fun.
And
so
was
I
it
have a
intentional?
question.
Sorry, me first, Marty.
Oh, it's been a minute. We must be having our internet is like slightly delayed. It's going to be a cut each other off kind of day, I think. I hope not. Let's pull that. Let's not. Let me not put that out in the universe. We're not. It's not going to be a cut each other off kind of day.
Our connection is slightly delayed today, more than other times. So yeah, we probably are. One quick question, and then you can ask, I promise.
Sure.
Was it intentional that you went for the history angle, Stephen? Like, did you actually sort of take, before you started, think, I think that this would work in schools if I wrote it this way and included history, or was it kind of accidental?
I didn't for the first book. The first one has a little bit of history, like they're on a discovery for like a treasure of some old coins that are lost in the woods in the creek behind their house. So that one just kind of started out as more of an adventure. And then for the second one, I kind of saw how the school and the families were responding to some of the elements about it being local. And it kind of, the kids move from up north to Virginia, and people really seem to hook into that. So that's where I started kind of thinking, all right, there's so many things that I'm learning about. Having this combination is kind of a cool thing. And I didn't see a lot of other things specifically about Virginia that have been doing it that way. So it seemed like a good fit. And I'm glad I did, because I think that's been a big part of the hook of kind of getting a little bit of a niche of something different that people have really tapped into. So it's been good.
Yeah, that actually flows really well into the thing that I was going to ask you, because when you were kind of giving us the background about the first book and the second book and how they came to be, you slipped a little sentence in there saying, oh, and then my children's elementary school picked it up, and then and you just kind of went on from there. So I would love to know more about that part of it. My children's elementary school picked it up. That's kind of a big deal. So how did that happen? Did you go out and pitch it? Did the right person happen to see a copy you had printed for one of your children? How did that actually go?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think, it's one of those things with a lot of things. I think you sometimes need a combination of really hard work, but then kind of being at the right place at the right time. And I think, you need both of those things to really have things happen. So I think I was really fortunate that some of the right people saw it. Like when it came out, I was trying to get it out in the community, and I had it, I pitched a little feature article to our local neighborhood newsletter that goes, in this little local corridor. And I sent it to a few schools just to kind of start getting it out there, and a few writer friends that I knew. So I did a little bit. I really didn't know what I was doing. And then the reading specialist and the principal kind of latched onto it, and it kind of went from there. So, it was definitely a combination. I think you have to have a little bit of luck sometimes to kind of have things. But, you hear a lot of times people say it's amazing how the people that are really trying things end up with a lot of luck, right? So I think the more you do, the more you can kind of help yourself get some more, luck, so to speak.
That's really cool. And I haven't heard people in the indie space in a while talk about using traditional media and having it be actually useful for them. But it sounds like in your case, it was maybe having that feature article in your neighborhood newspaper was the thing that triggered the people at your children's school to be like, hey, this looks legit. Let's take a look at it. And so yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, that's really cool. So I'm putting that back on my list of things to actually think about, because I had kind of chucked it.
Yeah. I think there's big things you can do, and there's small things. And I think I'm always open to trying something. I may not do it again if it doesn't work out, but you never really know which thing you're going to try that's going to end up having an impact. So that's why I try to do a bunch of different stuff and kind of see how it goes.
Yeah, I also love that you've cast your net to your local area, which I think, well, I certainly forget, because I always feel like I'm, in the outback. I'm not in the outback, but I feel like I am. And so I, like try to get all the American readers, which is reflective in my sales, but like nobody certainly not in Melbourne, Australia, I don't think has bought my book unless they're related to me somehow, which is kind of crazy. So I'm, listening to you going like, maybe there is some, there's a reason to go to your local community and really start from that space. So that's great that you've done.
I mean, I think that's a key I've seen, and it doesn't necessarily have to, I think doing it geographically in your local area is really good, or it can just be a niche topic. And I think the way that I've been able to use that is to really try to penetrate that particular group, whether it's your location or like, I know I've heard you say you have like meditation books or whatever kind of subcategory you're looking at. And then the benefit can be if you really get in deep with that group, then they're buying a lot of books locally, and then it starts to feed into like the algorithms with Amazon and things, so that it starts to kind of gradually expand nationally beyond that, even though, it's almost like your own little reader list, right? You hear so much about having your list. Well, your community could be like your list if it's influencing the sales that are helping things spike elsewhere.
Right, and it's
So I feel like that's like one of the genius quotes, right? Where you have like the little cutout quote, and it goes next to the person's face, like, and it's really cute. Your community could be like your list, like that's really good. That's really good. What did I cut you off from saying, Elena?
I was going to say the penetrate your market, like was my little sentence. I want to put that in, on a big whiteboard in front of my face. Like it's sometimes I think we forget to go deep into that market, which to be honest, I haven't really done. I probably absolutely should have, but I'm so focused on writing the next thing and the next thing and the next thing that I probably haven't taken that product, which is that series like you have, and used it to actually penetrate the market, which is kind of obvious now, but thanks, Stephen.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that's a good, it's a good thing to work on, whether it's New Orleans or Australia or whatever you're doing. I think it can be a neat way to do it.
So how are you doing that? Like, I know that you're probably not just only selling in your town at this point, right?
Right.
Tell us more about how you are like getting into the market in Virginia.
So, I mean, it's been a slow transition. So I started off with the one book and then the second book. When the third book came out, I redid all the covers. So, if I look back at the early covers, I literally did my first cover myself, which is, obviously a no-no, but, you can skate by for a little while. So I kind of rebranded the covers to have a kind of a little bit more like the Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew kind of look to it. And then that helped a little bit. And then I started using, for me, some of the different locations that the series is set at. So like, for example, St. John's Church is where the second one's at, which is where Patrick Henry gave his famous "Give me liberty or give me death" speech. So that's right in Richmond, and it's got a lot of history, and they have lots of people that come and visit the gift shop for reenactments and things. So, just kind of chipping away at little things locally. And then also, trying to just do some of the regular stuff like advertising. I had a really big spike when I finally was able to get a BookBub ad for the first time. I took the first 3 books, and I really anguished over whether it was the smart way to do it or not, but I put the first 3 Kindle versions of the series into a box set. And then, it was normally like $5.99. And then I decided, they keep rejecting me. I'm just going to go for it. And I put it on sale for 99 cents. And sure enough, BookBub took it. And I was like, oh, I'm sacrificing all these dollars I could be selling. But what I realized is that, there's always going to be more readers, especially with kids, right? It's the good and the bad. They cycle through and you lose them, but you got a new crop coming up. So you're not going to run out of people. But the BookBub, what it did was it was able to kind of give that spike to just get it into the atmosphere and the algorithms at Amazon. And, that's one of the things, and it's been several things over the years, but that's one of the things I think that really did make a noticeable jump, not necessarily that month, but if you look, down the road, it just started to spike up a little bit more. In addition to having more books, every time I do a new book, it's another access point, and it just seems to incrementally kind of grow, which is obviously the idea. So that's been helpful too.
Awesome.
That's really good.
Yeah, I want a BookBub feature. That's a great suggestion. I keep getting rejected, but I keep putting my first free in series, which you're right, that probably wouldn't appeal to them. But yeah, like packaging it up a bit differently and not being precious about the dollars. I also love that you said, you know, there's kids cycling through all the time, which it, again, seems rather obvious now that you've said it, but I always hear the other end of that, which is we've worked really hard to gain our readers and then we've lost them. And I tend to focus on that part, but, you know, you just kind of moved me to the other part. Makes me wonder if discoverability isn't perhaps one of the most important things for children's book authors to really put, tell me a bit about how you approach that.
It's hard because I think you can go both ways. And I mean, it's funny, like we talked about the reader list, and obviously that makes a lot of sense, but I almost think, and I try to get mine as much as I can, but I think it's less important than it might be for the adult market. You know, you're John Grisham, you can have somebody for 60 years reading your books. Realistically, even though some adults are reading my books, you know, I figure I've got like a 4-year window with most kids if they kind of go through in the main slot. So what I've found is that, you know, take as much advantage of that as you can now. And the good news is if you hit a kid when they're in the beginning part of the window, when you have 5 books in a series, you know, you're going to have a lot more to give them than when they caught you a few years ago. So that's one benefit. But the other thing I've really tried to start doing is institutionalizing the series versus fixating on a certain kid or a certain family on a reader list. And I think that makes a lot more sense in the long term, because if you can get in with your local Barnes and Noble, and I've got the books in 3 of the Richmond Barnes and Nobles, or even a bunch of little indie shops, or some of these location gift shops, or, you know, even maybe more importantly now, the school librarians and the county administrators who are picking which book's going to be like the reading Olympic for that county for the year. You know, things like that can get you into things that will stick around even as the kids cycle through. So for a long-term strategy, that's kind of one of my big plans, is to try to do that as much so that you can be there. You're still going to hit the kids, and they'll hopefully get on your mailing list and do things while they're there. And maybe they'll have younger siblings that'll still make it a 10-year window instead of a 4-year window. But doing the institutions, I think, is in combination with the Amazon and everything else, I think that's a really key part.
Yeah, that really gels with me, because I really think about children's books as a long-term game, right? That I'm still buying Ramona Quimby books for children. Like how old are those? How old are those books? It's been a long time that they've been out. So trying to figure out like yourself so that you really are a part of a bigger picture, that like you're a go-to book for people who are not necessarily the current parents of children who are the current age in your, you know, like inside your target audience, because they're going to buy gifts, they're going to buy for nieces and nephews, they're going to buy for classroom teachers and whatnots, but also the managers in bookstores, the librarians are going to continue to stock those things if they are like a really high quality. Like you stick with children's books, I feel like you stick with the tried and true. So then to be a part of the tried and true and stay there, that whole idea of institutionalizing. So like when you're approaching people who are in the category that you're talking about there, like you said that you have like some books in Barnes and Noble, where you started to talk to school leadership, like how do those conversations go? Like what is it that you're saying to kind of get yourself in the door there?
Yeah. No, so the good news is that they kind of snowball on each other. So the more you start getting with the schools, they might also influence the fact that the Barnes and Noble has a lot of kids from those schools coming in and asking for it. So it starts to feed together, which is great. But to answer your question, so most of the outreach I do is via email, honestly. So I really do, like I'll put together like a PDF of a 3 or 4 pager that kind of gives the covers of my books and a description and about me and the general info. And just, you know, the way I started doing this, because it's obviously it's a lot cheaper than mailing everything to the schools physically and printing it all off. So creating kind of a standard package. And then, literally what I did a couple of years ago is I spent hours and hours, and I went through like 4 surrounding counties in the area onto all the school websites and made a spreadsheet and jotted down. Most of the time you can find the email addresses of the librarians or the principals and things. And I made up a spreadsheet and made a big email, and I've integrated into MailChimp a little bit in certain ways. And I try to be really judicious, so not over sending it. I really only send it once or twice a year for specific things that are relevant to them. And that way I can feel good that I'm not spamming them, and I'm something related to their education. But that has been good. And if you send it out to enough schools, you send it out to 200 schools, and what I found, elementary schools, there's a heck of a lot more elementary schools than there are middle schools and high schools. Just in some of the surrounding counties, and Richmond is not New York City, but it's fairly large. So like our county has 30, 40 elementary schools in it. So, there's a lot. If you send it out to a bunch of them, even if you get 10% or 5% to get back to you, you can get a handful of schools, and then you start to get some testimonials, and they talk to each other. So I've been invited to a few things like at the county level where all the librarians are talking or presenting. So again, it kind of starts, it's like having more than one book in the series. They start to feed off each other if you can build some momentum and success, and it kind of starts to grow that way.
So in terms of making contact with them, what are you like? Are you just alerting them to your books, or are you offering them like for you to visit, or like what's your initial kind of in?
Yeah, so it's a combination. What I usually pitch the most is visits, especially now that I've done a decent number of them. So I'll really say, I visited, even when I just started, I could say I visited a couple of schools, to say, doing little sessions that are usually about 30, 45 minutes in length, and talk about my books, about being an author, some of the history in my books, show some pictures of some of the different places. One of the things the kids have really enjoyed is reading about places that they visited or that they can go visit. So those are some things that are fun. And just having an author that's local, I think that does make a big difference. And a lot of people have some appeal to that. I've gradually kind of increased the charge that I'm charging as I kind of go along year to year. But that's a lot of it. And then I make a little flyer that I'll provide ahead of time for some discount book orders, so that they can feel like they're giving the kids a deal. And it's also a great way to supplement getting more revenue in the door from each different visit that you do. So that, there's some schools where I can get almost as much profit from the book orders as I can from the actual school visit fee, which is really great.
So did you initially start off free and then you slowly raised it? Is that how you did it?
The first couple I did, I tried pretty early on to go to like, $100, $150, something, pretty nominal. And then kind of gone a little bit over time. So the way I'm doing it right now, to be transparent, is I'm saying, and this is up from even from last year, to say for a visit, for a single session, within an hour or so where I am, I'm charging $300. And then if I to do 2 or 3 sessions, I'll add it to do for $400. So, and trying to keep it reasonable. I've heard a lot of people say that some of the big name traditional published authors come in town and they ask for $1,300 or something. So wow. I think it's still within the bounds of reasonable. And it's one of those things. The more you start to have success and become a little bit more well known locally, it's a little bit easier for people to go for that too. So I tried to go slow and then trying to build it as things got a little bit more of a reputation. So it seems to have worked well.
No, that sounds really good. So when you are, I'm sorry to keep asking you questions about this, but like I know like I have a ton of questions, so then I feel like I am like every man. So then probably there are people who are listening who have the questions too. So what did you use for social proof? Like, did you really just say, oh, I've done a couple of these school visits, and so then like I'm golden? Or did you walk in with reviews maybe of yours that you pulled off Amazon? Had you applied for like local awards? Like what did you do to like help them know that these were good books?
Yeah. So I haven't, I'll kind of go backwards. I haven't done any awards. I've heard some people talk about awards. I don't know if it makes a difference or not. I haven't gone that route. I don't know. To me, it doesn't seem like it really moves the needle a whole lot. But I think different people have different experience. You know, I did try to get some reviews, you know, early on, kind of saying some reviews. And then right away, I tried to get from some testimonials from school librarians or teachers or parents that have read it or participated even in that first school at my kid's school, just to say, you know, this is something that someone's tried, they've enjoyed it, it has a lot of appeal, and you know, all you need to do is just kind of get your foot in the door a couple places, and then you can use that and make sure that you ask someone to take some pictures, right? Ask someone to give you some testimonials. It's easy to walk out the door and forget to do those things, but think ahead of time about what are the things that I could use down the road that would be really helpful for me to resell this, essentially. You know, it's as much as it's an author visit, it's a lot like a book. You know, you're trying, it's a product and you're using it to sell, even though it's yourself, but you want to sell as many of these slots as you can of you getting in and meeting with the kids. The great part about it is when you're there, it's a heck of a lot of fun because you get to meet all these kids and they, you know, they think you're a rock star, and it's a lot of fun. But from a business side, I think that's the key, is to think about, you know, it is a selling strategy. So that I think that's an important way to look at it.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying a lot of strategies that almost sound full-time, like, so it sounds like you're prepping yourself to be able to be full-time, but right now you have a day job still, correct?
I do. So I run a sales team in my day job. So I have had some experience kind of trying to get out and sell things, and I think that has been very helpful.
No doubt, dude, no doubt. But this is why we're here to learn from you.
Yeah. So, you know, I don't know exactly when the finances will work out, and I'm still very much employed and supporting a household. So I can't really say much more than that. But, you know, at some point down the line, it would be great to be able to do it, you know, just in terms of the time that it would free you up, because I do work from home, which does give me some flexibility. I mean, I try to like take a couple hours, you know, every other week in the morning to just shoot off somewhere, and then get up early and do work, you know, before that, just so I'm still not cutting out on my day job. So, but it is burning the candle at both ends a little bit, and it does, you know, take time. But I think doing it locally, you know, that's the advantage. If you're going to someplace 20 minutes away versus 3 hours away, that makes it doable, and that's been a key. And trying to be very careful with your calendar and keep track of who you're booking when, so that, you know, there's only so much time, and I will not take people more than, you know, every couple weeks, because I just don't have the time. But like, for example, this past spring was a really cool thing where this local county picked my second book to be what they're calling like in their 4th grade reading Olympics program, where it's like a battle of the books or something. So they had been reading the book, and then they coordinated to have me do like a little mini road trip where I went and visited all 14 of the elementary schools in the county, and like 3 a day. And for those, I literally took vacation time just so that I would have blocks of time, because it just, you know, it was taking most of the day. So, you know, that's another thing. It's a bit of a sacrifice to really, you know, burn some of your vacation. But in terms of trying to build the business, so to speak, and get it to where at some point maybe you can make a change, you know, and I got to pick and choose where I do that, but I think that's worthwhile if you can get the right spot.
Is it
so? That's on. No, oh my gosh, it's today.
It doesn't matter.
Today.
They're used to us talking over each other anyway. It's only other authors. Relax.
I know, but
relax.
But we had gotten where we never did it anymore, and I was like, we're so home free, but like this connection is not as good as it has been on most days. Like a little spotty today.
Well,
so
hopefully it's not me.
Must be it.
No,
No,
it's
it's totally not you. It's definitely not you. Recognize it. It's probably me. I was just gonna say that. Oh no, because it's like so flexible that not a lot of people have a ton of flexibility in their jobs. But actually, what you were saying actually sounds really workable and manageable for somebody if they have the kind of job where they're able to take days off. You know, if you have the kind of job where if you take the day off that you lose the money, then that wouldn't work. But if you have a job that has like vacation days, or where you can work a little bit extra hours at one time to make up for things that you've done that you've done for this at another time, then this sounds like it would work for a lot of people. This idea of really strongly targeting your local market. And I wonder if that's something, this is just me wondering, you don't have to answer it, but I wonder if that's how effective that would be if the subject of your book were not specifically local. Do you know what I mean? Like, are people just as excited about local authors as they are about the local topics? I wonder. That's a question for the universe. Now, Elena, no, go. You go.
I was going to say, to some degree, I think the answer is yes. I think it does depend, and it probably does help a little bit. But I mean, like our community, and there's a lot of children's authors I know around, and there's a lot of folks that do a decent number of school visits. So I think there is a general appeal to having local authors talk to kids, and I think that's something that most people can probably try to capitalize on if they really work at it.
So you've got a standalone book. Do you push that? Have you sort of
Sorry, I'm kind of losing you. I think you were asking, how do I market the standalone book? Is that what you said?
When you approach school, is it now did you hear me?
Sorry, I couldn't hear what you said there. You're kind of
that's all right. I'll start again. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, all good. I was just saying, do you approach the standalone book in the same way? Like when you approach a school, do you show them all your books and say, these are, all my books, I'm a local author, or are you pitching it around the series because of the topic, and then what do you do with your standalone book?
Yeah, so the standalone book, Brother Wars, just came out 2 months ago, so I have had less experience, and the reason I started that was just to have something else to tap into. I mean, one of the things that I see is that I have probably 5 times more sales of my first book than I do of even the second book, and it kind of goes down from there. It's still healthy, but book 5 has a lot less than book 1. So my theory there is, I hate for so many fewer people to read book 5. So if I get an additional entry point, have more people reading book 1, and just another way to kind of cross-pollinate and get more people into the books and into the series, hopefully. But it is a challenge. One of my goals after I finish the next one in the mystery series is to write a second book in the new series, to keep that at least 3 books, just so, because I think having a series does really help a lot. So yeah, but it's going to take a little bit of time to kind of get it going.
Yeah. So I'm coming back to your time. I find it really hard to balance my time, and part of the reason I haven't gone out promoting the first series is I'm genuinely scared that that will become my full-time job, and that then I won't have any time to write any more books. So then I hide away and don't go out, and then everyone forgets the first books, and then I'm like, yeah, so how do you balance, how many books you write a year, your plans around that versus your plans of promotion and going out and about?
Yeah.
And your full-time job, which is, and family and everything else.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting. There's a few questions in there, I guess. So some of it is, at the moment, what I've seen the last few years is, the actual time I spend writing is probably the smallest of any of the functions. I don't know how normal that is, but, especially generally I've been doing 1 book a year. And so the fact that they're middle grade and, on average, they're probably about 30,000 words. So that doesn't take as long as a 100,000 fantasy novel, right? So I pretty much kind of do most of the writing in kind of a 2-month chunk of time during the year. So that in itself frees up some of the other time to do marketing and do different things and visits. And most of the marketing, so to speak, that I do, I think really is via email and on the computer. So, that's something that you can do in bite-sized chunks. You can spend 20 minutes as you're eating lunch doing some emails, or trying to put a MailChimp campaign together, or, applying to BookBub, or different things like that, or just little bits at a time, kind of like writing, right? You don't have to be writing 10,000 words a day. You can be spending 30 minutes at a time if that's all you have. So I think the key is treating marketing a little bit the same way, and just not forgetting about it and making it all or nothing, but just doing a little bit of it at a time each day, and kind of going from there. And it starts to add up, just like the writing part of it. But it is hard. I mean, that's one of the things, trying to have some more discipline about not constantly, like, I'm pretty manic about filling in my spreadsheets that track my sales and 10 ways till Sunday and everything else. So it gets a little bit much. So you can get a little bit, it's hard to shut it down sometimes. And that's one of the challenges for sure, but it's fun. And that's I think what keeps me going, that it's enjoyable, and it's very different than my day job. So it kind of fills a different hole from what that is. So
yeah. So that I feel like is a piece of advice that we've heard in slightly different forms, but the same advice a lot of different times, which is the idea of consistency. When I tell my children that my children do not like when I usually write in the very early morning, but if I wasn't able to get it done in the early morning and I have to write in the middle of the day, then I say, Mama wants to be a writer, so then that means that I have to write. Writers write, and that's the thing that writers do. So, but I hear you. A lot of indies are doing a much more frenzied pace with actual production than one book a year. But one book a year is essentially what happens in traditional publishing, right? Like that's about a book a year, and then the rest of that year is spent on marketing that book. And then next year you can get another book. So then, even though that's against kind of conventional wisdom for indies, that's the way that it's been working, TradPub. So, and it seems to be working pretty well for you. So maybe we should not discount that.
And I think some of it, it's, the more I think you can compare it to a business startup, right? So most businesses, you're not going to come out of the gate in the first 6 months and be an unbelievable success. So I think having a little bit of a long-term view and knowing that after you have your second or third or fourth or fifth book, it's going to gradually grow, and be content a little bit with that happening. And know that there's only so many hours in the day, and I've got a family, and I'm coaching baseball in the spring and different things. So there are periods of time where I'm just not getting any writing done. I might go 2 months without writing anything, and that's not really the right way to do it. And I would rather be writing a little bit every day, but I try not to beat myself up about it, because you just can only fit in what you can, and the more anything you do is a lot more than the person that is only watching TV at night. So I think that's a trade-off. And there are some nights where I'm not watching TV, or that I'd like to be watching a baseball game or whatever else, but it's a balance, right? And I also, when I'm not working at home, I do travel a few times a month. So long plane rides can actually be really good times to write, as long as the person in the seat in front of you doesn't crush your laptop. So I think that is another thing. I try to take advantage of when you have those hours of blocks, or you get stuck at the airport or something, try to use it to write when you're not interrupted with other things. So that can be something too.
Yeah, great tips. And I think there's nothing wrong with that approach. I mean, I know we hear from all the other podcasts that a writer writes every day and has to be consistent, but ultimately I think too, for kids' books, they're a bit more of a product. Like, it isn't just, you're not just throwing words out necessarily. Like, it's sometimes they're going to have pictures and all these other things that you've literally got to project manage, which might be a bit more complex. And I don't think there's anything wrong with writing and then putting out a product and spending some time on that and then writing. And yeah, I think we can get caught in, like certain myths that there's only one way to do it. So I'm glad that you said that, because that's kind of what I've been doing. So that's good.
Yeah, you gotta make it fit what you can do, right? I don't know that there's a right or wrong way. So.
Yeah, and if you were full-time, if we were all full-time, it would probably be a very different thing than.
Or maybe it wouldn't be. What did they say? That perfect is the enemy of good, or perfect is the enemy of done? What's the? Yeah. So if you're still moving forward, then I probably should keep moving forward.
Yeah, and you hear the approaches where, like just it says, write the next book, but then I'll hear, other podcasts, which is, don't forget your backlist, spend more time promoting that. Maybe you don't need to write as many books. So it's all about where you want to put your attention, and you're doing great. And that's encouraging that there is not just one way to do it. I wanted to ask off the back of that. So in terms of your online approach and reaching wider audiences, how is that part of your business going?
It's good. It's been increasing. So I think that's what I try to do, is have as many different kind of revenue streams as I can. So between kind of fees from visits and direct sales to schools, but also the ebooks and, audiobooks have started. I've just got the third book in the series into an audiobook, which is gradually doing more. And then the online paperbacks on Amazon has really been the thing probably since right before the holidays last year. In like October 2016, really started to pop. And, sometimes you don't know exactly what causes it to happen, but it just starts to circulate. So I think that's been, the Amazon paperbacks have really started to grow pretty substantially, where, the last couple months, I've had probably about 1,000 paperbacks a month through Amazon, which is, much higher than what it has been before. So, and again, trying to keep that, I think, in not the only thing you're doing, but I'm trying to keep that in the 30-something% range of kind of what is coming in from a ratio mix of things. So it's gradually, just kind of keeping an eye on things and try to gradually keep everything moving kind of forward. I put all the series also into hardcovers through Ingram Spark, which does take some extra investment to get the covers slightly tweaked and put them in. But I've saw immediate takeoff with that, especially with the schools, because a lot of librarians tell me, oh, do you have this in hardcover, because they last longer and they want that. So again, trying to see what's your buyers asking for, and find some things to help satisfy that, even if it's a little bit of an extra outlay in the beginning. It's more than made up for itself, just to be more like a traditional book, like they might be used to buying. So I think that's been good.
In terms of meeting your buyers' needs, have you found that teachers have requested supplemental materials or support materials to go along with your series?
I haven't done a lot of that. So, it is something, I've got a few, like I made a little word search for each of the books that is there. And I've had a couple little, what started out as blog posts, like about a historical figure that's in one of the stories. But honestly, I haven't seen a tremendous amount of uptake on it. So I haven't gone crazy with it. I've got a lot of ideas of, if I have more time, like going to some of these places and doing like a Facebook Live video or something like that from the spot. Like there's a lot of things you can do. Or doing like book club tours, or to try to, so there's things like that, but it takes time, right? But I haven't seen a ton of clamoring for that. The other thing, I tried to get the books like the advanced reader test, the AR tests, and that's a whole nother thing, which you have to get that approved by the group that does those, and that hasn't worked out. So I've had a few schools kind of make their own AR test. But so
the accelerated reader. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
yeah, that's a hard nut to crack when you're not in the big publishing groups. Right. So if we figure out how to crack it, we'll totes share it back with you.
Yeah.
But I have people ask me that literally at least once a day. Someone says, "Are there art quizzes for these books? They're great," and I'm like, "No." But maybe if you keep requesting them, they'll.
Yeah, that's right.
What is that, you guys? What is that? Tell me what that is. For our Australian viewers, tell us what that is.
Oh, good point. Okay, so Accelerated Reader is a program that some schools use that essentially, like, it's supposed to be a reading incentive program, and it also functions kind of like a reading comprehension quiz, so that the kids can prove that they read the book, and then they get a certain number of points depending on like how long the book is, how hard it is, and then every year they have set a goal. And so some schools really do Accelerated Reader, like they just have everything focused around Accelerated Reader. So like sometimes the kids or parents like will say, oh, he would love this, but it's not on accelerated reader, so he's not going to get credit for it. So then we're not gonna buy it. Sometimes, right? Not always, obviously, but that's definitely a thing that I've heard. Or it's discouraging because they're like, oh, I want my child to be able to get credit for this when they are doing the reading there. So it would definitely be better to have it than to not have it.
Yeah, and is it for all age levels? Like it's all different ages?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, it goes pretty much through what, I mean, like when you get through the end of 6th grade level and actual reading level, then it like that's pretty much the end. After that, context changes more than content and context changes more than like actual difficulty level for the reading. So there's definitely through all the elementary ages there's level, and I'm pretty sure that's through like 8th grade actually level. But don't 100% quote me on that. It might be 6, but I think it's 8.
Gotcha. And sorry for the basic questions. I've got a few more. So elementary level, what is that? Because we don't use that language. Like what year levels is that?
From like say 5-year-olds through 13-year-olds.
Right, gotcha. And then middle school is what?
Well, middle school would be in there. So then that would be like 11-year-olds to 13-year-olds, somewhere around there.
Okay.
And that'll
okay.
from county or parish to county or parish and from state to state.
Right. So Stephen, you going to the elementary schools is essentially targeting the 8 to 11-year-olds, 8 to 12?
Yeah, so most of the time I speak to like 4th grade, which is probably about 10 years old, is kind of what I call my sweet spot. But usually I say the books are for like 7 to 12. And I've actually been invited to a couple middle schools, which is on the little bit older. So kind of the 12 to 14-year-old kind of range. So, it depends because every reader is at a different level too, right? So sometimes they have some 6th and 7th graders that aren't great readers and they don't want to be reading, what some other kids are reading. So having something a little bit easier to read is very appealing to them. Or I have some 7-year-olds that are reading Harry Potter, and so it just kind of depends on what the kid's doing. So.
Yeah, I have a really vague question, nothing to do with anything really, but my question to you, it's a personal question, is given you're a spreadsheet guy, I want to know what would be the amount that you'd look down your spreadsheet and go, wow, I'm making this amount. Now I can potentially go full time. What would be the number?
OMG, that was totally my question next. My question next was how will you know when it's time to go full time? Oh my gosh. Back and see. It's so awesome.
Yeah. That's it's a tricky question, right? So, and I think it's obviously different for everybody.
Exactly.
At the moment, I'm the sole breadwinner in the house and have been at my current job a long time. So, those are all factors to play in. I would love to be able to say someday that I'm getting 6 figures from the books, but, there's a lot of different factors, healthcare being certainly one of them is a really big thing too. If you quit the day job, that's a major expense that could be something to factor in. So,
in the US, your healthcare is connected to your job. Is that right?
Most of the time, yeah. A lot of times. Yeah.
Okay, did you see my emoji sad face? We're not about to talk about US healthcare in this joint. That's going to be like...
No, US healthcare. I don't know. I hear this all the time on podcasts, and I'm like, what are they talking about? Is healthcare connected to their job? What is that? Because it's not in Australia. Your job has nothing to do with your healthcare. So it's kind of
most of the rest of the civilized world. But cool. We do what we do here. It's awesome.
6 figures. All right, I'm putting down 6 figures. High 6 figures.
Well, I think we'd all like to have high 6 figures, but there's a reason I'm not doing it full time, right? So, but that would be nice. So we'll see someday.
So are we allowed to ask about the film deal now? Or can we go to film? Can we go to the film deal?
Yeah, sure.
So tell us about that. What is it? Where is it at? How did it happen?
So I think it really fits into what I was saying before about sometimes it's being at the right place at the right time, so I freely admit some of that. Literally what happened here is that, my first book was at a local independent bookstore and someone got it for their son, and who was a reluctant reader, didn't really like to read hardly at all. And he apparently buzzed through Summer of the Woods really quickly. And he went to his dad and said, I love this book. This should be a movie. His dad is a local TV commercial director, and has been wanting to kind of do his first kind of feature idea. And so he literally sent me a message on Facebook one time saying, hey, would like to talk to you about this book. Let's do lunch. So, we had lunch, and, we both have 3 kids and a lot of things clicking about making something that's family friendly, but exciting, kind of the difference between, an animated movie, which parents don't really always want to watch, to something really cool and innovative, like Stranger Things on Netflix or something, but that's really not appropriate for kids. So something in between that can fit both sides of things. So that's kind of the idea. So that was obviously very surprising, and they're in the process. They found a screenwriter that has written the first draft, and they're in the midst of kind of revising that, and then hopefully next summer or something, if things keep moving ahead, to film it somewhere locally then. So I don't have a whole lot to do with it. It's not like a big feature Hollywood kind of production, but I think it's the idea, so many different things. Like indie film can be very different, just like indie writing is, so who knows with Amazon and Netflix and everything else, or other ways to get movies out there, you never know what could happen. So at the very least, I think it could be good for the books, and see what happens down the line. But it was very surprising, but really fun. So I try not to think about it too much, because there's not a lot that I'm doing with it. So it makes me anxious to think about. So I just kind of let it go and wait for updates on things. But but it falls into that thing. So obviously, there's a lot of luck that happens there. But I do think the idea of, if you get it out there, and that's where I have some friends that aren't indie, that haven't indie published and are kind of trying to go the traditional route. And one of the biggest things I tend to say is, listen, if you don't, the benefit of going for it and putting it out there, even if it doesn't sell very well, is you just never know. And if it's stuck in a drawer, or you're querying people for 3 years and it never goes anywhere, that's 3 years that you could be learning, getting feedback, getting additional books, and things can happen. And it's not for everybody, but I think for me, that's one of the real, I'm very thankful that I kind of went out and just started publishing them and see what happens. And everything doesn't work. I tried to do a book about a bunch of my blog posts that I mentioned, that's like a parenting book, and I think I've sold like 100 copies in 2 years or something. And, some things don't work, and I lost money on all the editing and the cover and stuff. But again, I think I'd rather try some things and see how it goes. And some of those things are probably going to hit. And then you kind of keep going in those directions that start to do better. So
that sounds amazing. And I'm already kind of seeing in my mind the marketing they're going to put together when the indie film that's based on one of your books comes out, that you're going to be able to pitch to teachers, and it'll be all like the books and the classroom video and like all these things like put together. And I'm sure that your sales brain will do a lot better with it than I will. But that sounds really cool. And like you said, like you just don't know. That's because that's what they say about marketing. Like there's so much of it, but like you don't know which part of it is going to be the part that like actually is doing something, but there's all this that's underneath the surface, right? Mm-hmm. That's, I probably threw in the entirely wrong metaphor, but that's what's in my mind right now. I'll know when come out, right?
And that's why I keep trying to do things, like I've been fooling around with Amazon ads, and I've tried Facebook ads, and different things, and some of it seems to work okay, some of it doesn't seem to work very well at all for me. But I think trying things and seeing what starts to stick a little bit is a good way to do it within reason.
All right, very cool. Well, my timer tells me that we are just about out of time. Elena, is there another question that you want to ask Stephen before we let him go?
Yes.
I see a hand.
only because Marty's a teacher, so I kind of go, can I ask another question, miss? So with
Yes, Elena?
Good. With the film, like, how does it work with the rights? You know, like what sort of, how do the rights work? Like, did you give the rights away for the film? Like,
yeah, that's basically, I optioned the rights to the director for that particular book, and it's for a certain length of time, and especially since it wasn't a big studio, you know, there's not a lot of money right now on it, but it's more of again, the longer term play and kind of the bigger things. And, you know, I did get a local lawyer that has a little bit of experience with intellectual property just to look things over, and that, which, you know, used up most of the money that came from the option. But, you know, so it's more kind of a fun thing to see what happens. And I think could be a platform to see what happens after that. And there's other books in the series, and maybe that could, you know, lead to more down the line, or just adoption and kind of notoriety, so to speak, with the books themselves, which is great. And it's really fun when you're up in front of kids talking, and, you know, this book is getting made into a movie, and everybody's like, oh, you know, ooh and ahhing. So, you know, it's a fun thing. I'm really fortunate that it's kind of been what it is so far, and we'll see what happens. You never know, right?
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's really, really great. I wonder if, you know, like you said, the parenting book didn't, you know, maybe, you know, sell as many, but, you know, from listening to you talk, perhaps the parenting book was more a book, you know, you wrote not for yourself, but, you know, like because you were going through things. Whereas I see for me, you started KidLit a little bit the same way, but then you veered to, wow, there's a market here, and you got really focused on meeting that market's needs, which maybe that's why that one blew up, you know?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. At the very least, it's very fun for me to read it and go back and, oh yeah, that's what the kids were doing, you know, 6 years ago. So it's a nice thing to have.
Now, it's been brilliant talking with you. Tell us where people can find your books online and find your presence.
Sure. So the easiest way to do it, my website is virginiamysteries.com. So that's the easiest way to connect, and that should take you to most other things.
That is amazing. Thank you so much for joining us, Stephen. It's been really lovely to talk with you.
Yeah, you as well.
If people are wanting to be able to see the episode show notes and get Stephen's website without having to accidentally misspell Virginia, which I did the first time that I was writing it down just then they can head over to our website and take a look at the episode show notes for this, which is episode 20, at the indiekidlitpodcast.com.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Stephen. Thanks for being our guest. You've been terrific.
My pleasure.